Hello, my loves. Today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories, and if you've enjoyed a Reddit story, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? Maybe that's the notification bell too, and let's start with today's story. Story entitled Mom Hates Me. So, for some context, I, a 24-year-old, moved into an apartment complex a couple of months ago. There are 4 in total apartments in the building. Mine, and my immediate neighbor who lives right across from me. As far as I know, it's a mother and her son, and we live on the bottom floor. Though there are a couple of stairs up to where we live, there are no apartments under us. Above us, however, there are 2 more apartments. An older gentleman, and a mother and her son and daughter. The building also locks after 4 p.m., meaning you can't get into the apartment without a key. Now, this woman has had an issue with me since I moved in, though frankly I never knew why. She's just always thrown glares my way whenever we pass by in the stairs. Our first interaction happened about a month of me moving in. I stepped out of my apartment to walk my dog, Lilo. Now Lilo is a small, neurotic chihuahua. She's not aggressive or mean like the chihuahuas you see in memes, but she's a very nervous and jumpy dog all the same. So as I step out of my apartment with Lilo, the mom and her kid come down the stairs at the same time. They spot Lilo, and without really saying hello to me, or greeting me or anything, they instantly dove down on her and started petting her, and talked between each other about how cute she is. Lilo was very nervous and confused at these 2 strangers suddenly cooing on her. I didn't dare say anything, because I have really bad social anxiety. Then they just left, again without saying anything to me. I don't have any more interactions with her until a few more months later, when I hear a ring at my door. My dog starts freaking out and barking, and I go to check the door, but there's no one there. What I do hear though, is giggling as 2 kids dash upstairs. I don't care too much about it and instead go back to my computer. Couple of minutes more, it happens again. Then again. After the 3rd time, I decide to go upstairs. By this point, it's far past 4 p.m., and again I hear them dash upstairs every single time, so I know for a fact it's the kids that live above me, and I'm frankly getting overstimulated and upset by this. So I knock at the door, and the daughter answers. I tell them as politely as possible that I know it's them running down to ring at my doorbell, and I beg them to stop because my dog will only get more anxious. She tells me that they haven't done anything, and I don't want to press it, so I just tell them to not do it again, before I go downstairs. The next day, the same thing happens. 2 rings, before I decide enough is enough. I look up the mother's number, and I send her a polite but lengthy text about how I know her kids are ding-dong dashing me and both me and my dog get anxious because of it. She doesn't reply, and instead comes to knock at my door a few hours later when she gets home from work. Now, you know when you can just tell a parent is entitled? You look at them and instantly see the tight lips and the posture, and you already know you're about to get an ear lashing? Yeah. That's what I see when I open the door, and I instantly tighten up. Another thing you should know about me is that I'm terrible and horrified of confrontations, part of the social anxiety, I suppose. So I'm already pretty much shaking in my boots. This woman starts by telling me that she heard that I spoke with her children, in this very accusatory, harsh tone. I reply, explaining why and what I told them. She gets snarky immediately, and tells me that those weren't her kids. I explain to her that I heard them dashing upstairs, and that the doors were locked, so I know for a fact that it was them. She continues to tell me that her children would, never, do that, only to go back on her words later and say that she's had a conversation with them about just this, and told them to not do it again, which clearly means they have a history of this exact thing. I just tell her again that I know it's them, and all I wanted was for her to talk to her kids about this issue because it's really bothering me. She gets angry, and tells me that it wasn't them and that her children are perfect and kind. And also when I texted her, her 1 kid was in the shower, so it couldn't possibly be them. Like she doesn't have 2 kids, and it didn't happen the day before either. At this point, my anxiety is through the roof and I feel like I'm about to have a panic attack, so I just tell her fine. I know it was them, but I'm not going to argue. And so she scowls at me and stomps up the stairs. The ding-dong dashing hasn't happened since, but her glares and attitude has gotten 100 times worse. She will look at me like I shot her damn dog every time she so much as sees me. Story: I don't want to accept my father anymore. Recently I have a fallout with my dad that led to me staying by my grandparents. In short, he became drunk and started to confront me when I said that I don't want to listen to his music. He listened it so loud that I could hear it clearly in my room, which is 2 rooms further away from where he is listening, and yes, my door is closed. In general, it is also thanks to his music that I don't like Vietnamese and refuse to learn it. Both of my parents are Vietnamese. In the past, he has his damn bass near the wall to our neighbor. Therefore, whenever he started to listen to his music, our neighbor started to banging on our door. Sadly, I am the only one that could hear it, as my sister is too nearby the music and my mother doesn't hear that well, so I am mostly the one who opened it and received our angry neighbor. My mother and my sister don't like the music as well. I don't particularly blame my neighbor, as I understand that he is rightfully frustrated over it, but the situation didn't improve when my father adamantly refused to confront him. I mostly had to pull him over, and it ended that he just screamed at our neighbor and slammed the door, and then it repeated until we could tell him to stop hearing his music. This occurred in the past many times. I am also the one who has to confront our neighbor most of the time, until my father accepted that we moved his places somewhere else, but that was more than enough to make me hate Vietnamese music to the point that my mood hit rock bottom when I hear it. I tried to let him listen to it a bit, but it only soured my mood more, and he never held on his promise to shut it after his proclaimed last song. One of the following will occur when he said that he will only listen to his last song. He will continue to listen and ignores his promise. He will restart the video in the hopes that we are too stupid to recognize it. He says he can't stop it as YouTube continue with autoplay. I know that it isn't nice to forbid him of doing STH. But if he can't learn to control himself, I have to do it. In his life, he only cared for himself and never questioned if his family is happy or not, and that only leads to me, my sister and my mother suffering under it. For example, we were on vacation in Vietnam and we were on an inflatable that was currently towed by a motorboat at high speed. As it was connected wrongly on the boat, the inflatable will tilt by every turn the boat makes. As we fall into the sea, we all have life vest on. It shouldn't have been a problem. There were also some wooden island near us. I fell on my chest and had trouble breathing as I float. My father was in panic as he wasn't a good swimmer and then pressed me down to rescue himself. I actually don't know what I should say to that. We both had life vest on, and how could you press your own son down to rescue yourself? This is one of the more severe story, but there are many others. He isn't better with his family like with my grandmother, his mother. There was a time where she was addicted to her sleep medication and she wanted to go to the ER even though she had nothing. It is way better now. My relatives didn't want to risk it and brought her there. Okay, to be more accurate, I brought her there as most of my relatives didn't live near her or are busy with anything else. They mostly called me and asked me if I could bring her there, and I am fine with it as I have time, and if it is an emergency I am more than willing to help. But one time when I was at home, my father joked about the fact that I will probably bring my grandmother to the ER while he doesn't have to do anything and doesn't need to care. Small reminder, this is still his mother. He also said that while I was in the same room. I started to question my kindness to other after this, but decided to stick to it at the end. When he is retired, he also expect me to take care of him, like paying him. Yeah, he can completely forget that the only thing I will pay is the money he has given me while raising me. Afterward, I will break contact with him. I know that probably most of the people here say that I don't have to pay him, but I see it in another way. As I don't accept him as my father, I see it in a way that I borrowed his money and just pays him back. After I got a job, I am currently studying engineering, to end our relationship. I will probably stay in contact with my relative, father sides, as I have a good relation with them, but I will not fold when they ask me to reconsider my decision about my father. My mother will probably also break contact with him as she only stays with him because of us, me and my sister, and when the time comes I will help her. My mother is probably the one who formed me as who I am today, and I am really thankful for her support and her teachings. Story, Mom saying I cannot yell at her. I promise this isn't what it sounds like. I just wanted to start off by saying I think I am a pretty good child, and my mom always tells me to. I am 18 and I help her by doing all the chores in the house. I understand she is a single mother carrying this family and working too. I go drive to get her groceries and food. I am going to a college soon and the tuition is completely paid, and she doesn't have to pay a cent out of her pocket. I really hope I have made her proud. I am always trying to be obedient, and when she gets mad I try to swallow it down and get over it. She asks me a lot of things that I sometimes don't agree with or don't want to do, like forcing me into certain clothes, and I do my very best to comply with it even if I don't want it. I do love her very much, and I love this family of 3 very much. Recently she has asked me to give her my university portal account login and password, to have full access to seeing my finances and refunds that get dispersed into my student account. She is also in a fit since I put the direct deposit from the school under my checking account instead of hers. I just thought I could be able to send the scholarship refund money to her. I hesitated to give this information to her because I wanted a little bit of privacy with my account. I wanted a little bit of independence with my future life and maybe managing my own finances in my own student account. I love my mom and I do admit I am still a very dependent child, but maybe having control over this one account would be nice. I wrote down my username and password, but I forgot an extra character that I use that covered all the site password requirements, like when they want a symbol or something. Anyways, long story short, she tried logging in and it didn't work, so I tried several other logins until it finally worked, and now she is blaming me saying that I purposefully wrote down the wrong password because I didn't want her to see my finances. I wanted to keep the refund money to myself or something, not that I really had much left after paying for my housing rent and stuff, and trying to manipulate her. I never yell at her, I always am obedient and highly respectful, even when I am mad, but every time she accuses me of lying it kind of sets off a trigger inside me. I did yell at her today and I cried and I got very emotional because this is just such a weird and absurd thing to accuse me of, that I don't want her to see my scholarship money or something, even though we went over the exact amount months ago, or that I want to hide things from her. Now she is telling me that I am not allowed to yell at her, that I must respect her, and I decided to talk back saying that if she didn't want that then she should not unreasonably accuse me of those things, and accept that I make mistakes. Now she is saying she can accuse me all she wants, and I better not yell at her, or in the future I would be yelling at her when she gets old. She is also afraid that I will be overly independent like my friends, and she is afraid they have influenced me. She is afraid I will not be one with my family. These are all her words. I always try to push down my emotions, and show her I am an obedient and respectful kid. But now I feel she has pushed a lot of my own boundaries, but puts it on me by saying I pushed hers by yelling at her. I feel like she feels like she can push all the boundaries she wants on me, but I cannot do the same back when I feel like she is overstepping. So I guess, am I wrong for yelling and getting mad? I will do my best not to yell ever again, but I just feel like the dam kind of opened here and I hate being accused of dishonesty. Story, entitled Grandma Hits Me with a Baby Stroller During a Graduation Ceremony. First things first, I'm an autistic 20-year-old. I'm pretty sensitive to loud sounds and large groups, which is exactly what a commencement ceremony is, unfortunately. I was there for my sister, though, and I don't regret it. I do wish I had brought headphones or something, though. The guests at the ceremony were made to sit on plastic bleachers in a large gym with barely any legroom or space for moving, especially once the benches filled up. I am also very particular about personal space, probably because of said autism. The forfair even sat down next to me. I was starting to have a hard time with the environment, so I went quiet and tried to focus on playing games on my phone. I was there with my parents and grandma, and I was sitting with an open seat next to me. Fair walks over some seats to get to the spot next to me and calls her family on the phone to tell them where she was. I was already worried that more people were coming, but I had no negative vibes from her specifically. Her family showed up 5 to 10 minutes later, a group of like 6 people, including a really upset infant. I'm personally not a fan of children in general, but screaming ones take my anxiety and overstimulation to a whole new level. Thankfully for me and everyone around them, the baby quieted down pretty quickly and didn't cry for the rest of the ceremony. What a polite little baby. When the baby showed up, Fayer unfolded a whole baby stroller and rolled it right next to her in the decking/foot area of the bleachers. The stroller's handle was a few inches from my face, and I obviously noticed it, but didn't confront her about it. I don't like making any scenes even if the outcome could be positive. She put the baby in the stroller and started rolling it back and forth in the free space between me and her, which means the stroller's handle was literally centimeters from my face every few seconds. I still said nothing and just focused on my phone. It played out for a while like this as I tried to block it out. I texted complaints to my friends and sent a selfie of me and the stroller handle right by my face. I was starting to calm down as she moved the baby to other family members, but when the baby came back to her, she missed putting him in the stroller and it came rolling and smacked my whole body and my face. Fayer did apologize, but I silently pushed the stroller back as far as I could to her and made its fine hand motion, trying not to leave the whole ceremony in general. Despite this, she continued rocking the baby in the stroller, and it got even closer to me. Intervals of her pushing the stroller into my face and me inching the stroller back when the baby was elsewhere and she was distracted happened over the next hour. Right as the ceremony was ending, my own grandma on the other side of me noticed I was silent and basically crunching myself as far away from the stroller as I could. She confronted Fayer and kept saying to her, "You're getting too close," while pushing the stroller back to her. Fayer was not receptive to this advice and kept shaking her head no and arguing with my grandma. I tried to block it all out as I was between the two of them covering my ears and looking down, so I don't remember too much verbatim. Eventually, they stopped and we left immediately because I was close to a meltdown. Fayer and her family walked by us as we left, and she said absolutely nothing. Frankly, I'll be glad to never see her again. I do feel guilty for not asking her to stop myself and then having my grandma argue with her, but I was not in the headspace or had the mental capacity to engage in any conversation. Story: I feel defeated and stuck. I want my parents to move out. My parents have been irresponsible my whole life. I've been homeless and in many uncomfortable housing situations, including living with extended family, homeless shelters, cars, or squatted housing on and off throughout my childhood. During my senior year of high school, I lived in a motel. I turned 18 in late 2021 during the pandemic while my parents and 2 of my siblings lived in the motel. I was in my first semester of college and had to return to the motel due to financial struggle. During that time, my dad had told us that the weekly rent owed to the motel was paid through a rental assistance program. However, they would spend their money on gambling, weed, and alcohol and never buy food, causing us to lose a lot of weight. 2 of us were in college, and they would take the relief money we received and spend it too. Then they would criticize us for not having jobs, even though my mom didn't have a job either and one of my siblings had to quit theirs because my parents would take their money while they were sleeping, and it got to a point where they couldn't afford transportation to the job. On top of that, I had no birth certificate or social security card because they lost it when I was like 5 and never replaced it, so I couldn't get a job until I got them. It took months, but my siblings and I figured out how to receive my documents and got jobs to save up to move away from our parents because their irresponsible ways were keeping us trapped in the motel with them. It was really hard to save and keep money from our parents. At first, my dad would tell me how he made more money than me and that my money from my near minimum wage job meant nothing, letting me know constantly that on a bad week, he made twice as much as me. Then he and my mom would ask for money. They would get mad when we asked them why or said no. It was hard with them taking our money, but after 5 months of working, we had enough money to start looking for a place. We decided not to rush since we also wanted money to save for a car. We told our parents we were looking for a place, and they said that they would also look for themselves. While still touring houses, we were given an eviction notice, and it turned out my dad had been lying about paying rent. We had no clue because he did say the program was over and would ask us for money to cover it. My siblings and I decided to just move into any place we could. We got accepted for a 3-bedroom house for a good price in today's economy, and we had our move-in day set just before the eviction date. Just before we moved in, my dad asked if he and my mom could move in with us for just a year and said that he would even pay half of the rent, and we could split the other half 3 ways. We didn't think he'd actually do that, but we agreed because we felt bad and didn't want them to be homeless, and we figured we could use their car some more. I ended up getting a new car the same week we moved, and then my parents' car needed some work. So we ended up splitting the rent 4 ways, me, 2 siblings, and Dad. Then he crashed his car and never got it fixed because he had no insurance. After that, it continued to get worse. My mom would take my car, lie about where she's going, and not bring it back in time for us to go to work. My dad yells at me for asking for the money in weekly increments but never has it all at the end or beginning of the month. They refuse to put money in the grocery pile but always eat the groceries. They will take things from my room without asking. They never put gas in my car after using it. They argue constantly. I was taking classes at a local community college but had to stop because I had to work more hours to cover for all the things that they do and don't pay for. This is just a small list of all the things they do that affect me. My siblings and I want to stay in this house because the rent is so affordable, and its location is extremely convenient for its distance from shopping, recreation, and my job. I can work 25 hours a week and go to school while living comfortably. How do I get them to move out? Or do I just accept that my siblings and I will have to move and leave them homeless? Story: my parents gas-lit me out of $50,000 plus when I was 20. I work with my family business. Not like I joined my father's established business, but we created it with my brother and parents when I was 18. Now around 14 years ago we were working in the coal mines in Queensland, Australia, and we did small jobs for the mine like drive machinery off-site for sales or maintenance, etc., and I drove a machine off that was old but well cared for. It was only being sold because it was very old. I found out that the machine was going up for auction the next day and told my father about it, how good it was, and he had a friend bid on it for us. The plan was we would go 3 ways, one me, one my brother, and one my parents, and my brother and I would get to be part owners of a machine. We won the bid and I think I was told to pay $35,000 for my share, and I did. Funny enough, the mine site we were on had a contractor working there that needed this type of machine, and a week later the same machine was back in the same place working again. My brother and I were told we would get 1/3 of the rental for the machine, and we were not great with keeping track out finances, so we just went on with life assuming it was being taken care of by my parents. 3 months or so go by with the machine working nearly every day, earning I think around $100 an hour, and the guy we were renting it to tells us that he will need this machine for the foreseeable future, so he wants to buy it for more than we purchased it for. Done deal, everyone is happy and the sale goes through, and we are told that it will take some time for my brother and I to see our share plus the profit from the rent, and time goes on. I asked about it 6 months later and my parents told us that we had been paid our share. I said I didn't think so, but they assured us we had. More time goes on, and when I ask again, then the money was used for tax, or they needed some for this or that. Fast forward 12 years later and my parents buy a very expensive house using the family business assets as collateral. Without talking to me, they start saying it's our house. I said it's not mine because I didn't put any money into it, but my brother did, around $80,000 I think, and my parents then said, "Oh, we put your share of that old machine sale in." Suddenly they now knew where the money was. Apparently they just decided to keep my money and my brother's money as a sort of cushion because we didn't need it. We didn't have any dependents and weren't married, I am now, so they needed it more. Suffice to say I keep my money separate now, and I don't lend them anything. I know I should be more outraged, but families are complicated, and I'm pretty sure I got a bit or brainwashing or something to get over. They have done a lot of shitty things to us over the years, but it's only obvious when looking back. Ngufap Dam Bao by Viet Tieng on Qua Ban Kong Koloi. Don van ben qua ben hoek bet dau nat ben dui de kiem traloing the fap, chintava dau ka. Sua loy, 0, Don Lua Chan 0/2000 GPT 3.5 Turbo Teep, TUC Kai Tien. Story: I may not be able to discipline your child, but I can redirect the energy. Yesterday was a rough day for me at the gym. Deadlifts are a wonderful exercise, make no mistake, but the last thing you want to do after completing a set of deadlifts is smile. Or move. So, rather than my usual plan of swim a few laps in the pool, I opted for floating around a little in the leisure pool at my gym. Move from one spot to another, trying to steer clear of children doing what children do in the pool, things like screaming, throwing toys around, swimming around without looking where they're going. Effectively turning leisure swim time into a sneaking mission. I was rather successful at this, right up until a boy who appeared to be around 7 or 8 years old decided to spike a beach ball into the back of my head. Wasn't a huge one or very heavy, little damage on my end. I figure it might have been a mistake, so I reclaim the beach ball and give it to the boy who'd thrown it at me. Less than a minute later I get doinked again, and so I reclaim the ball and ask the kid nicely to stop throwing stuff at me. He nods and grins and I go back to what I was doing. 3 guesses what happened next. If you needed more than one to assume, the boy spiked that ball on the back of my head for the 3rd time. See me after class. So, after strike 3 I grabbed the ball and asked the kid where mom was. Mom, as it turns out, was reading a book on a lounge chair poolside. Please note this place has an excessive number of lifeguards. Not as negligent as it would be at a hotel pool, so I dragged the child and his ball up to mom and explained that the kids beamed me with a beach ball 3 times and that's kinda not cool. Mom decided to do the head toss someone does where they're rolling their eyes behind huge sunglasses and said something to the effect of, "It's a beach ball. Boys will be boys." I toss the ball onto mom's legs and get back into the pool, keeping an eye out for the kid. A few minutes later I heard muffled giggling behind me, and then I felt the soothing sensation of a beach ball to the back of my head for the 4th time. I reclaim the ball, yet again, and intended on making eye contact with the kid and popping their ball right in front of them, but then the bad idea fairy rapped me sharply on the head with their magic wand and I had an evil grin, not unlike the grin the kid gave me after strike number 1. So I tell the kid to see me, I want to show you something. And then I submerge the ball under the water and pinch the air nozzle, which makes air bubbles shoot out. Happens to look exactly like someone was tooting underwater. He's not strong enough to submerge the air-filled ball, so I tell him to get on top of it and use his body weight to sink the ball. He managed to do that and his face lit up like it was Christmas morning and he'd gotten everything he'd asked for. He promptly swam off and found other people to annoy. I didn't get a ball thrown at me, and the kid's mom was pissed that she had to blow up the beach ball again. Was actually asking her son how it went flat so fast when it was a brand new beach ball, and between big gasps of breath trying to fill the ball up. Kid just points at me on my way to the locker room. I wave and say, "Oh, boys will be boys." Story: left her kid alone in a bookstore for hours, thought it was totally normal. This here happened a while ago. I recently got reminded of it after meeting an old friend. Thought I'd share this story because I know after 13 years in retail/customer services that many people would think that what she did was okay. Back when I worked in a bookstore in a shopping mall, there was this little girl. Maybe 5 to 6 years old, just sitting quietly in a corner, looking at the pictures of a book. At that moment, we had just noticed her because she was kind of hidden, tucked in a corner, and was totally silent. We asked where her parents were. She said her mommy was in the shop next to ours and told her to wait in the bookstore. We asked if she knew how long it had been and she pointed to the hands of clock, where they had been when her mom left. It had been nearly 3 hours. I still can't believe that kid stayed quiet for so long. And I'm still kicking myself for not noticing her sooner. We took her to the mall security and they started looking for the mom. That brainless woman was in another mall next to ours, 3 smaller shopping malls on the same street next to each other. The mall security were shocked. One of them was a dad and went to get the kid biscuits and an apple juice. He knew right away she was really hungry after 3 hours all alone waiting. I never forgot how happy she was munching on those chocolate chips cookies and sipping her juice box. They called the police and child protection services. Me and my colleague waited with the kid. We actually had brought the book with us for some reason, so she wouldn't be too scared. When the mom finally arrived, I swear, she did not understood at all why what she did was wrong and got pissed at us for going to security. She argued that her daughter was safe in our store and that she knew to not cause trouble. That got the police suspicious, because the kid was indeed very quiet and eerily well behaved. Looking back, it's kind of obvious that she was scared into being this quiet and calm child. The mother's justification was basically that since our store was selling books for kids and some toys, we were essentially babysitters and that we were the ones in the wrong for not wanting to do our job and watch the children. Needless to say, the cops were just totally done with her and took her to the police station. The kid went with child protection services. The mom was kicking and screaming, threatening to sue us for slander and defamation. Of course that never happened. But I hope that this little girl is now with better people, that she is now with people who love and cherish her. Story, moved for empty promises. So, I figured I'd share my family's story involving my wife's parents. I was in the army for a better part of a decade, meaning we moved often and were typically pretty far away from any family. My wife's parents, for all of those years, would constantly tell us how much they wished we would live closer and how they would help with our 3 girls and spend time together. I ended up getting out in 2018 and took the job around 12 hours from them. They were really upset, but I needed to provide for my family, so I took the best job I could find. They continued telling us the same things. If only you lived closer, we could do X, Y, and Z together, yada yada. 2020 and the world shutting down, and there was zero outside socializing. My wife and I decided to uproot our family to move closer to hers because we thought it was as good a time as any and we thought would be good for the kids. And wouldn't you know it, we see them less now than when we lived 12 hours away. The excuse now is that because we live 30 minutes from them, it is too long of a drive to visit each other regularly. The guilt trips never stop though. They still complain if we don't drop everything for something they want to do. We finally called them out on their BS. We are only here for their convenience. We are playthings to them that they can pull out whenever they are feeling bored and then put us away and ignore us for the rest of the time. They rarely spend time with their grandkids and only really want to see us on major holidays. We are now LC and plan to move as soon as possible. They act like we've somehow betrayed them and make statements like we don't want to live communally, like a cult BTW that was in response to us suggesting a once-a-week family dinner. So yeah, turns out these people who I previously had a lot of respect for are full of shit and extremely selfish. Really sucks though, because my family is absolute garbage, physical and mental abuse my entire childhood, so I was really happy to have married into a loving close family. Guess not. Story, finally stood up to my entitled parents and gained my freedom. For as long as I can remember, my parents have controlled every aspect of my life. They demanded perfect grades, picked my friends, and decided what hobbies I could pursue. Nothing I did was ever good enough for them. If I got a 95 on a test, they would ask why it wasn't 100. If I made a new friend, they would scrutinize them until they found a reason to disapprove. After I graduated college, I thought things would change. I landed a decent job and moved into my own apartment, hoping to finally gain some independence. But my parents had other plans. They started showing up unannounced, criticizing my choices, and trying to dictate my career path. They even tried to control who I dated, insisting that no one was good enough for their precious child. The breaking point came when I got a promotion at work. I was over the moon, but my parents were not. Instead of congratulating me, they berated me for not consulting them first and told me the new position was a mistake. They insisted that I should quit and find a job they approved of. I was devastated and furious. How could they not see how hard I had worked and how much this meant to me? I realized then that nothing would ever change unless I took a stand. So, I did something I had never done before. I stood up to them. I told them that I was an adult, capable of making my own decisions, and that their constant interference was no longer welcome. They were shocked and angry, accusing me of being ungrateful and disrespectful. But I didn't back down. I told them that if they couldn't respect my boundaries, they were not welcome in my life. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had, but it was also the most liberating. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I stopped answering their calls and messages unless they respected my boundaries. It wasn't easy, and I felt guilty at times, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. A few months later, my life had transformed. I was excelling at my job, had made new friends who supported me, and was in a healthy, loving relationship. My parents eventually came around, realizing that they had pushed me too far. They apologized and agreed to respect my boundaries, and our relationship improved significantly. Standing up to my entitled parents was the most challenging thing I've ever done, but it was also the best decision I've ever made. It taught me the importance of self-respect and the power of setting boundaries. Now, I'm living a life that I am proud of, free from their constant criticism and control. Story: couldn't handle living in that home, so I left. I cut off my toxic mother, and this is what she did. For some backstory here, my parents had shared custody of me a couple months ago. I had just gotten back from visiting my grandparents in my hometown. Both my father and stepmother sat me down to have a talk. They said that social services were becoming more concerned over me and my siblings' well-being at my bio mother's home, especially with her just being charged and all. So they asked me, since I had already been thinking about leaving, if I wanted to leave at the end of the next week I would be at her home. I said yes. But it was a very hard decision for me to make. Not because of my mom, but because of my younger half-siblings that lived with her. The time I had spent living in her home created so much trauma for me. Her boyfriend would verbally and emotionally abuse me, as well as blame anything that went wrong on me. I once asked him why he hated me so much, and he said, "Because he looked like your father." My father had done nothing to him. My bio mother and him would also fight all the time. I would have to try to take my siblings out of the room so they wouldn't hear it. They have been together since I was 5, and I am now currently 15, and I believe they are still together. I left that week because I was reaching my breaking point. I hated going there. The week I planned to leave on, I decided to write her a letter telling her why I had left. I wasn't expecting that great of a response, to be honest though, because in the past, when I would try to tell her how I was feeling about anything, she would just brush it to the side. She would get mad at me too for saying how I was feeling and would make anything I said all about her. So here was the letter I left for her. Dear Mother, I had decided to write this letter to you as a type of farewell, at least for now. I'm going to be living at Father's house full-time from now on, and by the time you read this letter I will have already left your home. I know hearing this will probably upset you, and I'm sorry for doing so. But this is all for the best. I don't really know how to put all my feelings into words for you, and I have always had trouble with that. I just want you to know that the reason I myself am leaving is because I don't think you're a bad person, Mother, but I do think that before I can come and start visiting you again, you need to get help. By how things were going, this decision was not just up to me at this point in time. Also, please don't blame Jenna and Father too much. They just honestly want what is best for me and my mental health. To be honest, I have many more things I would like to tell you, but I gave up on that idea a while ago. Every time I would try to share my feelings with you, you would never really listen and sometimes even become angry at me. That's why, if you noticed, I have become more distant towards you. Furthermore, all the lying, saying hurtful things about me, and the excuses. I have become to not trust you. I really wanted to believe that it would never have to come to this again, but Mother, you were the one that decided it did. I hope to be able to see you again once you have gotten the things you need and when I am ready as well. I'll always love you and wish the best for you, even if don't believe so. Farewell, Mother. Hopefully we will be able to meet again someday. I tried to express all these feelings to her and see if she would maybe understand why I decided to leave. But she just responded to me with these messages. Amazing. I do not know how you could give up on a parent. I never could do that, and I have had screwed up parents. My mother has a mental illness my whole life, and I would never do to her what you just did to me. My dad is an ass, but I still could never do what you just did to me. Love you, but will never understand your cruel nature. You never got that from me. Then she sent me this the next day: if you want to stay at your father's permanently, that is your choice. It sucks for me as I do love you. I have moved for you and everything else, but it seems I am never good enough. Furthermore, since my father still had to be in contact with her for certain things, I asked him to ask her if they could somehow plan for me to see my siblings, and this is what she said about it. You will need to come and talk to me before I agree to anything. After this message, it was just the same BS over and over. Or saying how she didn't trust me to see my siblings. I mean, it's not like I pretty much raised them myself anyways, right? I haven't heard or seen my siblings in 3 months, and it's really affecting me badly. But today, I was told that I was going to be able to see them next Friday, and I'm so excited and happy. Although, there was a catch. My bio mom has to be there. My father and stepmom and a social worker is going to be there though. I just hope she doesn't still try to ruin my visit with my siblings somehow. Story entitled Mom and Son at the Flea Market. So this happened on Sunday, but I haven't had the time to post this. Thankfully, I wasn't really involved with anything here. As I was a bystander in the story, I decided to go to the flea market to look for old action figures to add to my collection, as there's quite a few booths that sell them. I was looking at the Power Rangers figures at one booth. I'm a huge fan of Power Rangers in Super Sentai, and I bought a blue ranger and a pink ranger. That's when a rather rude mom and her son, he looked to be around 4 to 5-ish, walked in. Her son picked up this huge Transformers figure. I don't know which one it was, as I'm not a Transformers fan, and the only ones I know are Optimus Prime, Bumblebee and Megatron. And well, he wanted it. The mom then found the guy who owns the booth and asked him how much it was. He told her that it was $150. The toy was still in the original box, and it looked pretty old. And well, she wasn't happy about this because it was too expensive, and she asked him if she could have it for $10. The guy told her that she can't buy it for $10 for obvious reasons, and well, she kept arguing and trying to buy it for $10. All this while her son kept whining and crying because he couldn't get the toy. The guy then told her she could buy it for $60. I think he just wanted to get rid of them, and honestly I don't blame him. And well, that's when the mom snapped and yelled at the poor guy, saying that the toys he sold looked bad and that he was rude and that she will never buy anything from him. She then picked up her son and walked off, and I heard the mom say something along the lines of, "Don't worry, mommy will get you a much better one and not a bad one from that mean old guy." When I went to pay for the Power Rangers, I told the guy that I felt really bad for what just happened even though I wasn't involved, and he just laughed and told me that it wasn't the first time he had an encounter with those two. Thankfully, I never saw them again afterwards, as I think they left. Story: How do I handle an entitled friend? I have made some posts here about my friend, so some of you might know what I'm talking about. I really need advice of what to do and if I should cut off my entitled friend. I feel so stuck on what to do. I met my friend in college back in 2019. When I met her, we became friends instantly. But with that, I learned about her horrible childhood trauma. Her parents came to the US illegally, and they are still here without status, and how her uncle or asterisk pet her until she as the age of 17. As her friend, my heart was so broken for her, and I knew life isn't easy on her. Both her and I changed a lot since college, as one does. I met my fiancé, and she has a boyfriend. Her and the boyfriend are a match made in hell. The stuff she tells me makes me really not like this guy. She would tell me how they always argue. She claimed he cheated numerous of times, how he is forcing her not to take birth control, and they have unsafe intimacy. When they argue, he always screams at her to shut the F***ck up. The guy seems like a complete loser. Even with all their issues, she always looks past it or just forgives him. There are many times that I would plead for her to break up with him, and it just never happened. Then she would say something like, "I'm just learning from this all." She has also spent $2,500 on his birthday and Christmas gifts. She always just buys him stuff. Whenever we're out, she ends up buying him expensive clothes or food. I do buy clothes for my fiancé if I find something affordable but I know he'll like. But most of this girl's paycheck goes to buying her boyfriend stuff. She is in constant financial hardships because of it. She even sends DoorDash over to his job every time it comes time for lunch. The other night we went out to dinner and she decided to rush off when the bill came to call her boyfriend. I told her to wait and ask the lawyer for 2 separate checks. She told me she will zell it to me after her call, and when she came back she so happened to lose Wi-Fi service. She told me she'll send me the money when she gets home. It's been days and I still didn't get my money. With all of the horrible stuff she has told me about her boyfriend. She asked me if he can come to my wedding. I'm only having 50 to 60 people. It's going to be very cute and intimate. Plus the times I've tried to meet him it never happens. My friend would always say she wants to double date just for her to back out when I try to make it happen. The one time I almost met him she was dropping off food for him. She insisted on parking a block away from his house and keeping me in the car. I told her it seems weird to park a block away from the house and she decided to move the car closer. But she made me stay in the car and it was very awkward to say the least. So I don't know how I can invite someone to my wedding that I'm not allowed to meet. I also feel like she's so self-absorbed. I was going through a rough patch. My fiancé and I had to do long distance for a bit due to having to apply for a K1 fiancé visa. It was really hard on me not being with him and I went to such a dark place. Luckily I'm doing better now and we got approved. So my fiancé comes back in late August. I tried telling my friend how hard it's been on me, but somehow the conversation always goes back to her and her life. Since I stated my fiancé is Korean. I love him so very much and everything about his culture is so beautiful. I have been to South Korea a few times and I'm going back in August. My friend knows how much I love his family and the culture. So the other night my friend was ranting of how her cousin is dating a Korean American guy and that her aunt set her cousin up to date him despite my friend. I asked her why and how that would spite her and she said my aunt knows how much I love dramas and K-pop, so she definitely used that to get my cousin to date a Korean. I told her that Koreans aren't accessories to have and really I questioned the legitimacy of this. She then went on by saying how much she loves her boyfriend and how she prefers having a black man over a Korean man. I don't know what else to do. I feel like my friend is just going down a dark hole. I tried suggesting therapy to her and she told me it's white people shit, so she wants no part in it. I feel so frustrated and upset with myself that I can't help her. But I don't know what else to do. I get so disgusted whenever she mentions the boyfriend and the relationship. Even if they are doing well, she reminds me constantly how well they are doing. I can't be happy for her because of how horrible this man is. I don't know what else to do to help her and I just feel myself growing apart from her. I feel horrible saying it, but I find her unbearable now. I miss the friend I had back in 2019 and I don't know how else to get her back. Story: my ex demanded me for child support for a kid that is not mine. My mother and sister are on their side. Some years ago, I dated a girl. The relationship was bad. She was very controlling and abusive. It ended up really bad and we broke up. I kept going on with my life, and after some years I got a decent job, enough to solve all my needs, have a comfortable life and make some savings. The thing is, a couple months after getting my job, my ex contacted me. She first asked me to talk. I believed that she may want to reconnect or something, but she showed up with a 5-year-old child, claiming he was my son and demanding for child support. I didn't believe her, but the child age matched the time since we cut contact. I got advice from a lawyer, a friend of mine, to try to solve this out of the court. I offered to take responsibility, pay all the costs and being an active part of the kid's life, only after making a DNA test. Everyone was okay with this except for my ex. She acted offended and demanded to just give her the money she deserved. She used all the excuses she could, even contacted my family to told them I was trying to avoid taking responsibility of her child. When she ran out of excuses, and the DNA test was finally made, and surprise! Not the father. She was so mad with the result, and cried about the money, saying it was unfair and she deserved it. But she didn't accomplish anything. Moving on to the last week, there was a little party on my parents' house. My brother, a friend and I were talking, and my brother started to joke about the situation with my ex. My friend and I started to joke about it too. Some of our comments were a little dark and bad, but we were far away from the rest of the people. Literally, we were on the opposite side of the house, and nobody else could hear us, at least that was what we thought. We were laughing like crazies when my sister appeared very angry and pushed me against the wall. She spied us and heard our conversation, and she was really mad. She started to yell at us about how horrible people we were for being mocking of a poor woman. Few hours later, when the party ended, she asked me to go to the kitchen with our parents, and she started to say how awful I was for the previous situation. Apparently, my ex had been in contact with her, and she believed her version, and that was her way to have an intervention. My brother and I were like, "Are you serious?" when she started to say how I forced my ex into be a single mother and that I have the moral obligation to help her. My dad only said that we maybe were being too cruel making jokes of her, but that I wasn't responsible for that kid. My mom then surprised all of us when she said even if the kid is not yours, you are making more than enough money to support that child, you should have helped her. Since then, I had been receiving texts, my dad and my brother are on my side, saying I'm not responsible for her, but my sister is telling me how horrible I am for being ruining their lives. My mom only said it's your decision and I respect it. I'm just very disappointed that you ended up being so selfish. I'm aware that she doesn't deserve my money and am not planning to give her any, but the constant harassment of my sister trying to guilt me, it's just exhausting. Story: parents told my brother that he could take my house, and I could just live in the camper in the backyard because I'm single and he has a wife and kids. I'm a single man in my early 30s. I've got a brother who's 29, and he's already got 4 kids now. He had his first at 22, and the second followed a year later. Then the third 2 years after that. And the fourth is the most recently born a couple months ago. His wife, my Sael, and I do not get along as she always likes to try and get a rise out of me by acting superior. Then turns into an extreme self-victimizing drama queen if I retaliated against her in any way. She can cry in an instant and can put on an extremely convincing show to get sympathy from just about anyone. My parents and brother absolutely adore her, even though they know exactly how she really is and just don't care. She's very good looking, I'll give her that. But she's so awful that I could never be attracted to her. She also refuses to get any sort of job, even though she has a college degree and my mother willingly helps with the kids all day. So their finances are entirely dependent on my brother. This also means they can't afford to live anywhere but my parents' house. And privacy is a bit of an issue with all of them under one roof in a 3-bedroom house that was built in the 60s. Growing up, my younger brother was also the obvious favorite. We're 3 years apart in age, but he developed a superiority complex because I was badly punished if I retaliated against his antics in any way back then. It was obvious my parents cared for him a lot more because he got the lion's share of everything and less people called them out on it. Which did happen a fair bit by other members of family. Which is why my parents packed us all up and moved us about 150 miles away from them, so they generally would only see us on holidays since it was a 3-hour drive. My brother got physically abusive towards me on a number of occasions, flirted relentlessly with my first girlfriend to the point she broke up with me, and laughed at any misfortune I had. And my parents just told me to suck it up whenever I was upset about it. I only got equal treatment when my parents wanted to keep up appearances. I admit it was rather funny to see the looks on their faces whenever they had to treat me equal to my brother on birthdays and Christmas because other people were present. We had relatives that were very nosy and loved gossiping drama. So my parents did their best to hide what was really going on, and threatened to take all my stuff away if I didn't keep my mouth shut. If anything, it just made my parents celebrate more when I turned 18 and moved out because it meant they no longer had to provide for me. I wasn't even done with high school yet when I moved out. But couch surfing was far better than living with them. I was low contact ever since leaving home. They didn't even show up for my high school graduation. But I really didn't care. From that point on, I would usually only see my parents and brother on holidays like the rest of the family. The start 2020 pandemic was not kind to me. I lost my job and couldn't renew the lease on the condo because my roommate also lost his job and neither of us could afford the place on unemployment money. It was a rented 2-bedroom condo that I really loved. As the lease was ending, my roommate left early to move back in with relatives, and I had to sell nearly all of my stuff because I was soon going to be homeless if I didn't downsize to an extreme. I really shouldn't have rented a place that was so expensive. But I liked living the high life. Until that life wasn't kind to me. And I realized I should have been living somewhere far cheaper so I could have saved more money to fall back on. But I had a plan. I own a truck simply for the fact that I've always loved trucks, so I found a $1,000 camper in good shape and put it on my truck just so I could live out of it for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, but I ended up living out of it far longer than I ever thought. I originally was hoping to be able to live out of the camper at my parents' house, where my brother and his family still reside as well. But when I asked my parents to let me stay for a while, they told me they had a full house and didn't want me there. Plus, we hadn't exactly gotten along in the past decade. They said they'd only agree to let me park my camper there if I paid them basically what it'd cost to rent an apartment in my area. That was way too much just to park my camper. I was jobless and trying to save as much of my unemployment money as I could till I could find a new job. I may as well be living in an apartment with that rent price they were asking. My parents called my camper an eyesore and told me to take a hike since we couldn't come to an agreement. And Sil thought it was absolutely hilarious I had to live in a camper. My brother joined her in pointing at and mocking me while calling me a homeless bum. I parked my truck/camper in a store parking lot to sleep on the first night that I had nowhere else to go. I felt scared out of my mind that someone might try to break in. Suffice to say, I didn't sleep well that night. There was nowhere else I could go as any other relatives that owned houses were fairly far away, and all my friends were all apartment people. And I was pretty attached to my area as well. So I didn't want to just leave. I'd also had my mail forwarded to a friend's apartment. It was the only way I could still get my mail anymore. Finding a stable place to park was pretty difficult. I went looking around to try and find a job similar to my old one. It took months of living the nomadic camper life. In that time, I had to deal with a lot. Everything from beggars and drug addicts, to people demanding I leave because my camper was an eyesore. At one point, someone who told me to move claimed to be with an HOA. I wasn't even parked on a street with houses. And when I questioned what HOA, they got incredibly belligerent and threatened me. I moved my camper anyway just to avoid the trouble. In order to have a steady supply of electricity, I learned to use a long extension cord to plug in anywhere I could to recharge my camper batteries. This meant sneaking around and plugging it into an outside outlet of a random building while parked on a street. I know that's a crummy thing to do. But I had to keep my batteries charged so my refrigerator would stay cold. I had a small solar power bank for recharging my phone. But I didn't have anything like a generator. And generators are noisy and require fuel anyway. So I did what I had to do. After months of living like that, I finally managed to get a new job. I had to move to the neighboring city to find a job that didn't involve retail. I worked retail while in college and promised myself never again. Though I was nearly ready to break that promise. I was still getting unemployment money. But I had no stable place to live while receiving it. And I didn't want to still be jobless when it ran out. Plus, I was bored out of my mind. I had little else to do but read, watch movies on a small portable DVD player, use my phone or laptop, and keep note of where I could park and what local public bathrooms I could use. I kind of envy that the Japanese have public bathhouses. We could really use stuff like that over here. When I finally landed a new job, I practically lived in the back lot of the building by the warehouse in old employee parking spaces literally no one else seemed to bother using because they were so far in the back that the area was borderline forgotten. My boss/company owner actually liked this arrangement because I was willingly available to take any shift I could get, so long as I had enough sleep. He even let me take the camper off my truck and set it up in one of the spaces so I could drive around without it. Not exactly sure if this was legal, but no one bothered us about it. The entire time I lived back there, I didn't have to deal with many trespassers. There were a few, but the security guards escorted them out. I was pretty much on call almost all the time when they needed me, and was working virtually every day of the week. My boss let me plug my camper into the building for power and water, and I paid a small amount of rent by working for free on Sundays when no one else was in the office but the janitor and security guard. Beyond that, I usually had to shower at a friend's apartment, or at my local gym as the camper didn't have a shower in it, and only a portable toilet. And I didn't want to fill it because emptying it is a nasty chore. So I used other bathrooms as often as I could. I had a key to the warehouse, and could go in to use the bathroom there at any hour. I was even on a first-name basis with the night security guard. He's since become one of my closest friends. The camper was easy to heat in the winter with a small electric heater. Summers were not fun though. The camper didn't have AC, so I had to get a used portable air conditioner just to make it bearable. I made a lot of overtime pay, and hands-on learned some new skills from other employees. Eventually, midway into this year, I landed a better position in the company as a supervisor, and started making a better salary than my old job. That's when I decided I wanted a house. The scare I'd gotten from losing my condo made me realize I needed something much more stable for the long term. I looked around for something close to my work, and just 2 miles away found a 3-bedroom manufactured home on a small property. But I managed to get it for $10,000 less than the asking price somehow. I used nearly my entire savings for a down payment and got approved for a home loan. I finally didn't have to live in a camper anymore. There was enough space for me to back my truck in behind the house to take the camper off to set it up in the backyard. So I put it there as its own little building just in case I want to use it again. When I was fully settled in the house, I was dumb enough to brag about it on my book of faces. My family saw the post, and that's where this shit really starts. After a few weeks, my parents and brother along with his family came to visit completely unannounced to have a tour of my home. I didn't even give them my address. So how they found out where I live, I still don't know. None of my friends have fessed up, and no prior family members visited me before that. So I wonder if they stalked me at work and followed me home or something. It really wouldn't surprise me. Once I opened the door, they practically all shoved their way in like rambunctious tourists. Then just started making themselves at home. They all kept poking around, and Sael had this creepy smirk that she was repeatedly flashing me. And it was only later that I figured out why. And it made me madder than a bull on steroids that just got stung by a hornet. My parents were constantly talking about how I've got so much extra space now. And it's too much for someone like me who has no wife or kids. Sure, not now. But maybe someday. And my brother kept remarking about how there was more space than our parents' house, and my house was closer to his job too. Red flags all around, I know. Eventually, my brother asked me to speak privately. Everyone else suddenly left the room and piled out onto the front porch. That's what finally made me realize they'd planned something. My brother, let's call him Dan for the sake of simplicity, said the house was too much for me alone. And I should let him move in with his family because his wife is pregnant with kid number 4. And my house is much closer to his job. He pointed out that I already have the camper, so I could just live in that outside while they live in the main house. And I'd like to point out that Dan never once spoke of offering rent. Mind you, he's got a good job. He also started talking about how there would be changes, and even curfews. And that I couldn't just walk in at any time without prior notice. If it weren't my brother, I'd think the person I was talking to had lost their mind. But Dan lost his marbles long ago thanks to our parents treating him like he was the center of the world. I tried to speak, but he kept talking over me as if I had no say in the matter. There was no way in hell I'd rent my house or parts of my house to him. Other people maybe, just so I can pay the mortgage off more easily. But certainly not him or his nasty wife. I've heard of this exact kind of situation in videos online many times. And never once did I think I'd actually live it because I thought it so ludicrous. But my parents, brother and Sael do all fit the bill for a bunch of narcissistic entitled crazies. So I picked up my phone and set it to start recording. Then just held on to it. Dan didn't even seem to care or notice that I'd done this, and just sat there with his arms waving around while talking about all the reasons of why he needed my house. Then went from saying that to acting like it was a done deal and trying to reach out his hand to shake mine. That's when I finally showed my backbone and said hell no. And I said it loud enough that Dan stumbled backward for a second. I'd rarely ever raised my voice to him on that level because I was punished by our parents whenever I did. But this was my house, not theirs. My spine can be as shiny as it wants here. I stood up and then told him that my house was not up for grabs. And acting like I'll let him move in just because they want it won't make it happen. I bought my house for me, and it's not my fault he keeps having more kids and has to keep living with our parents because he can't afford to move out. Dan got as physically close to me as he could without actually touching me and said that I didn't deserve the house, and he needed a better place for his family to live. I laughed back in his face and said that was total bullshit because I worked hard to be able to buy my house. Of course I deserved it. Dan started yelling that I have no wife or kids, and I don't need all the space. So I may as well give it to him. I said I'm not giving him anything. And he never even offered to pay me rent. If I let him move in, I'd still be covering the entire mortgage on my own house without even being able to live in my own house. Then Dan told me that he shouldn't have to pay rent because his family comes first, and our parents said I was going to do this, and that I will. I yelled as if their word was law or something. And told Dan that they did not have the right or power to give my house to him. Then right one cue my parents and Sael barged back in through the front door and surrounded me to try and force me to agree. There was a lot of fighting. But to sum it up from this point on I heard the line, just do it for Dan way more times than I can remember. In the fight I told them all they don't have a say in my life or my house. And to get out before I called the cops. Sael screamed the loudest at me about how she was pregnant again, and I can't do this to her. I said I did nothing to her, she just assumed she could take from me like I would just allow it. I had no obligation to her or her family. Then I called her a stuck-up bitch who never had any respect for me. So I don't care what she thinks or how many kids she has. I have no sympathy for her. She won't be living in my house. Well, that made her angry enough to attack me. She got in one good hit on my face and tried to do more, but my brother held her back kicking and screaming. She kept demanding he let her go so she could scratch my eyes out. The phone I was holding recorded pretty much everything. So I held it up and said I was going to call police if they didn't leave right away. My parents told Dan they were leaving. Then my mother said that I had a week to come to my senses. I told her I won't be, and to not come back. Then I told Sael that my phone recorded everything, and if she tries anything, I'll press charges for assault. She screamed at me and then stormed out loudly crying with her face in her hands. My mother was the last one out the door and said that I better do this for Dan and Sael. I responded by telling her I won't be. Story: what is wrong with me? Since I was an adolescent, I had this thing that I think/thought is a gift from God. I can look to people and read their emotional state, intention, and stuff like that. Or so, I think. When I had a girlfriend, from time to time, I would get suspicious and start to think that my girlfriend is cheating, lying, hiding things from her past. This would hurt me big time. I would obviously find one or two things that can be understood as evidence and proof of my claims or suspicions. Most interestingly, I can't really tell why the past of my girlfriends and wife are so important to me when I also believe that God can heal your spirit and that your past does not condone you if you ask for forgiveness full-heartedly. I hurt so many people to the point of either breaking them, or maybe I just didn't know them as I thought. Anyway, I destroyed several relationships because of this. When I grew older, I met a very special person, but the suspicions remained. I would accuse her of being unfaithful constantly. I'd be certain that she was lying to me. Sometimes, she was lying. Sometimes, she wasn't. I also hurt her a lot because of this. Maybe the fact that I was right sometimes is just because we're humans, so we make mistakes. If you think somebody did something bad, but you don't know exactly what, you're probably right. People do bad stuff all the time. Since I was a kid, I would see people snorting a white powder, and I would question myself what that was. It took me some time to realize that it wasn't salt. When I was a kid, I tried to snort salt, and it was not very pleasant. Sometime after I was married, I decided to experiment cocaine. I went to my cousin, who was a recovered crackhead. He told me he had stopped snorting cocaine. I really didn't think about how bad of an idea it was to both fulfill my curiosity about the drug while asking for an ex-drug addict to use drugs with me. I do not feel so bad today because I found it that he did not stop snorting at all. To this day, he is still doing drugs. Either way, I tried it, thought I didn't feel a thing, but I actually felt. I started mixing cocaine and alcohol, increasing the frequency of use. Stopped drinking and kept the cocaine for good. Time goes by, and I had a period of my life where I abused so much of cocaine that whenever I would hit a line, I would get instant psychosis. Where I live, what we call cocaine is actually just a mix where there's some cocaine in it. No wonder if I would try to smoke the best powder of the state in a cigarette, I would also get high from smoking it. I had a bad friend who would put things on my drug in order to steal my money or to do something that I am unaware of until today. Once, I am pretty sure this friend gave me a cup of water full of mode mushrooms because I had some visual recording of small pieces floating at the bottom of the cup. Please don't judge, I was high on things I don't even remember. Too intoxicated to think before doing. After I stopped, I started having the most profound psychosis I ever had. I was certain that my wife was raped by this friend. She was sleeping with my kids. It was around 4 to 6 a.m. I ran to her bedroom and woke her up, saying that she was raped by this friend. A lot of things happened that day. I stayed around weeks with this psychosis. I could not let this go. Until this day, it is still hard to remember this without thinking that I am about to have a psychotic break. After this period, I started binging cocaine more often. I mixed it with mushrooms additionally 2 or 3 times. I used to take some Ritalin as well while binging cocaine for days without sleep. When I'd include Ritalin in the mix, I would get the most intense psychosis I ever had in my entire life. It was hell. The things I believe would hurt me so bad I would wish it was a dream the entire time. I have been clean for more than a year now, except for marijuana, which I am reducing with time. Even though today I am no longer using, almost every day, my mind talks to myself distantly, and I immediately start to feel the doom of these same thoughts. I think that my wife is cheating me with my dad, cousins, and brothers because I lived with my mom, dad, and children for months when I stopped. They helped me a lot to get my life together. I started to imagine that my mom and dad were hiding this from me because they fear I would use it again if I found out. It is important to point out that I do not hear voices or anything of the sort. I most likely listen my own voice. To the point of being afraid of thinking, because certain things that I tell myself, it simply sticks to my head so badly, then I need to do something about it to feel okay again, like, revisit a specific subject of my suspicions once again. Several times before I stopped, I went back using because of these thoughts, and even though the drug would worsen these beliefs, the drug would make it not hurt. It'd make me feel okay with these thoughts. It is simply destroying my life now. It is affecting my work like never before. I stay hours thinking about this every day. I talked to my wife several times about this, she answers me, She convinces and comforts me, but sometimes it feels like I need this again, like we never talked about this, or it feels like we never sort this out, even though we did, several times. I remember this was the same that would happen with my ex-girlfriends. I'd need to revisit the subject many times, like I knew there was something that I was not being told. I noticed it's getting so much worse, and I am so worried. Before I used drugs, I didn't have any diagnosis, but I was never normal. I had mood swings, ADHD, and now I can look back and be certain of this. When I stopped, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ADHD. I started with valproate, then lithium, because it was not effective. Less than 2 weeks ago, I started 50 milligrams of quetiapine every night because lithium, even on 300 milligrams IR or 450 milligrams ER, was making me so intoxicated that I was dysfunctional, cognitively impaired. I couldn't even finish a sentence without having my thoughts interrupted by something I could not explain. I wonder what your opinion is. How come a bipolar person is having this kind of mental breakdown? Why? How do I stop this? It's like I am a prisoner of my own mind. It is so painful to see everything around you decay because you are not able to live. I thought so many times about taking my own life, just to be free of the pain. I have so much, and I should be grateful. These thoughts should not be important to me, but they are destroying my life little by little. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.